Hey guys, it's Crossroads here. Thanks for tuning in. Today we're going to look at Enphase, and I have with me Carlos. I'll let him share just a little bit about himself. Carlos is one of two guys that really encouraged me actually initially to get into posting actively about stocks on X that I was investigating anyway. And that eventually led us here to YouTube. So you're actually my second guest ever, Carlos.
Woo!
You've been in
And last.
an interesting stock, Enphase, that we're going to discuss today. But can you just share some of your background just as an investor, like who you are, whatever you want to share from that, and then what led you to Enphase?
Well, I think anybody watching this already knows who the hell I am, right? Been seeing me for a while. I've been investing for a long time. I mean, I probably bought my first stock, I think in 99. And I'm trying to beat my best all-time returns, which were when I left my portfolio alone for 6 years and didn't check it. So I'm trying to do better than just leaving my portfolio alone.
Yeah, I mean,
by being an active investor now.
Yeah, the dead, the inactive, people in coma, they tend to outperform the active investors.
Oh my God, I saw that stat. It's true. Like the dead guys with their portfolios at like max all-time highs.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're trying to beat dead people.
Yep.
Try to pretend like we know what we're actually talking about. Enphase, I would say we started talking about Enphase in 2000. It was actually Vitali turned me on to Enphase. We were looking at a bunch of companies at the time whose market cap had fallen precipitously, and we were looking for those deals. FUV was one of those stocks. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh yeah.
And he started investing a bit earlier than I did. I would just buy call options on them, but I wasn't really holding any shares. And then very quickly, the stock was, I think, in the $20-$25 range. It was really cheap. And then from then, once the things like the IRA, or once Elon helped usher in the idea that hey, sustainable energy should be a thing.
Right.
All of those green energy stocks started pumping, and Enphase was one of them. And it quickly got up over 100, and it stayed there probably 2.5 years. So what we're looking at now is a retracement back to, I would say, November of 2020. So that just as a basis, we're talking about a company now that you are able to buy at prices that we haven't seen since, I think, around November, December 2020 is when it had a breakout and didn't fall below 100 for a long time.
Right. Yeah. That's one of the things that got me interested is so last year, I heard you and Vitali talk about Enphase for a long time, and I'm like, hey, it's too expensive right now. I'm interested. Mm-hmm. When it fell to about 140, 150. I was like, it's a down cycle, but I'm really interested. I actually bought a few shares, and then I sold them because I'm like, you know what?
What'd you
I
sell
just
them
want more Tesla, and it worked out really well, But Tesla had fallen too, and I wanted to grow that position first. It was actually my number one ad all year, which people were like, oh, it's dead money. So they're saying the same thing about Enphase right now. I don't think they're saying that about Tesla, and of course, Tesla has an energy sector that's doing very, very well. There's a little overlap with Enphase, but. So why Enphase? What do they do? What differentiates them as far as a company? Why'd that get your interest initially?
So we'll answer this two ways, because there's people that already know about the company. And so to not bore them, we'll answer that. And then we'll talk to people that have never heard of the company before. Essentially, Enphase's flagship product are these microinverters that are placed underneath solar panels. They don't actually make the solar panels. So if you go and get a solar system installed in your house, they'll have a company. They'll give them a great deal on a bunch of these solar panels. Now, how that solar panel's energy turns into energy that you can use in your house, there are multiple systems to handle that. And there's two schools of thought. Enphase's idea is turn the DC energy that comes from the solar panel, that the solar panel generates from being in contact with sunlight, into AC energy right at the panel. Send that AC energy down to a collector box, and that box then goes into your home and your home panel, and that powers your home. Their main competitor is a company called SolarEdge that has a slightly different idea. They say, look, take all the DC feeds from the solar panels and bring them into a box where it's converted to AC energy right next to your home panel. Two different schools of thoughts. I've had solar, and I've actually had both systems installed in my house, and by far the microinverter system is superior for a number of reasons. The inverter is the part of the system that converts the energy from DC energy that your panels create to AC energy that you can use in your home. If you only have one inverter on the wall, and it's a big ass inverter with a bunch of capacity, if that inverter goes down, none of the energy that your solar panels are creating becomes usable to you as a customer. Whereas if you convert it at each one of the solar panels, if that panel has a problem, or if a cord is cut, or if a squirrel gets in there and bites through the cable, or if the inverter goes down, you're going to lose production on that one panel, and the rest of the system will keep going. It's a built-in fail-safe by what do you call it? Diversifying or distributing the risk across all of the panels. So by far, that's a better system.
Yep.
Are Enphase systems more expensive than, say, a SolarEdge system with a single inverter system? By and large, yes, they're slightly. But once you start getting into scale, say if you've got 30, 40, 50 panels, and you also include battery backup, the difference that you're paying overall, I think, is nominal. And the idea of buying these systems is that they are paying for themselves anyway. So you might just be extending out a couple of months the repayment of the system. But honestly, you just want a zero energy bill. That's the goal here. You want a zero energy bill. And I'll tell you this much, for anyone like myself that has a SolarEdge system with a single point of failure, when it fails, you immediately regret not going with the Enphase system. And that's exactly what happened to me. I had an issue where it wasn't the EV charger. My home system, my home heating is an electric water heater. And every time that water heater would turn on, it's like, I think it's a 48 amp, 240 volt system. The initial surge, the power surge of that thing turning on overloaded the SolarEdge's microinverter, and it would basically turn off anytime I asked for hot water. So can you imagine every time? And it's also like, it worked. It would keep turning back on, but that can't be good for the inverter to receive it, to be receiving that sort of an energy spike. So that's a much broader conversation that we could have at any point. If people want to have that conversation, you can have the conversation about single inverters versus micro inverters. But let's just assume that the micro inverters are the better system. And then you say, okay, well, now I want to invest, right? And so is Enphase the premier technology or the premier company to invest in? After 4 years, my answer is still yes.
Okay, why?
Because the way that Enphase makes their money is by selling their inverters to the solar installers that sell those to customers and install them on their homes. So Enphase's products are like the base layer of other industries, of the solar installation industry. Enphase does not deal directly with customers. They deal with like suppliers, a supply house, and they'll sell them a bunch of systems, a bunch of inverter systems in bulk, who will then distribute those to their local installers, who then resell those again to the customer. So when you're that many levels deep, what you're basically saying, if you think Enphase is going out of business, is saying, okay, so if there's less demand for EVs, the companies that mine the lithium are suddenly going to go out of business.
Right.
It doesn't make sense.
One of the really compelling things about Enphase is like they understand that there is a cycle. Like it's a very cyclical industry, and they've survived. I think this will be the third bear cycle that they've survived through, maybe even more. I looked at when they became public anyway. Since they've been a public company, this will be the third bear cycle that they will have survived. And a lot of the other competition that comes in, they go, just take on a lot of debt and just try to grow as fast as they can. And when that down wave hits, they go out of business. They're gone. And so that's, I think, one of the reasons, both as an investor, but also, from a product side, like if you're installing solar, if you're giving some sort of warranty, you want to pick the company that's actually going to be around after the next bear cycle. And that's Enphase. Like even in the balance sheet, as down as it is, revenues are down year over year. They're still making money. They're still buying back stock. They still have insiders, of course, purchasing stock as well. There are some concerns, but it's one of those that, unless the sun stops shining all of a sudden, in which case Enphase is out of business, they're going to be around. So,
yes. Well, yes, they're going to be around as long as the sun keeps shining, and as long as people still see the viability of solar. And this is Enphase's big weakness right now. There's two things that affect Enphase's stock price. Okay, assuming that solar installers are not going to go out of business and stop installing systems, what are the big drawbacks or the big concerns, like the counterparty risk? What's the risk for Enphase's stock? It's regulation and it's a credit environment. Those are the two things. We had both of those things working towards Enphase's advantage from 2020 on, when you had the IRA and there was a big push for green energy. So the regulatory hurdle was cleared. Yep. It was like green light, go and invest in green energy. And for all the customers, go and get green energy. You had that. Actually, there's three things. The second one that we said was the credit environment. These are expensive systems that you're most of the time not going to purchase out of pocket. You're going to get some sort of a financing. So when credit is more expensive, you're either going to pass those on to the customers, right? You're either going to pass on the higher rate to the customers, or you are going to lower your profit margins. But here's the thing, even if the installers lower their profit margins, it doesn't necessarily mean that Enphase feels that, because they're just a supplier.
Right.
So that doesn't necessarily mean that. What it does affect is the number of customers that are going to be, bidding and looking for jobs. The third risk to the third factor in Enphase's stock price, or the viability of that company, is energy prices. As energy prices go up, like traditional energy prices, oil and gas, as long as that goes up, then solar itself becomes a viable option, because historically the energy prices have been stable. Now, having been a solar customer for a few years now, I've seen energy prices on the electricity side skyrocket. Now, that's a function of being in California. The state absolutely sucks. They want to take every fucking dollar out of your pocket. If you're saving 2 cents here, they want to get that 2 cents. It's fucking annoying for a country, for a state that is supposed to be leading in sort of green energy, where more sun falls here than anywhere else. The administration in this state is so it really is more anti-green energy than I've ever seen before, and I hope that changes. So the three things now that we're pushing Enphase stock in 2021, 22, 23 are now working against it.
Yeah.
Regulation is a nightmare, both on the EV mandate and the IRA, the tax incentives. Then you also have regulation increasing the price of energy production, of electricity production. You have high interest rates that are keeping customers from wanting to get systems in general. So there's a lot of negative catalysts pushing Enphase stock down, and you're seeing that.
However, priced in? Oh, go ahead.
Do I think it's priced in?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I mean, that's what's been being priced in. And then the other part of the story, and stop me if I'm rambling on too long. I've really been thinking about this since we were going to set to go last week, is this. The other thing that has been pushing Enphase stock down is the fact that Badri, as a CEO, is brutally honest.
Yeah.
On the earnings calls.
So
what I think you've seen happening, and I'd love to actually see this, I was actually looking to see this, is the percentage of institutional holding of Enphase versus retail. And what I feel is, like, say in this $60 range, a majority of the holdings, I would venture to say, is retail. So there's like a certain 60, 70, 80, maybe $100 price of Enphase that's predominantly retail. Everything above that starts to be institutions, which is why you see in Enphase's charts, we'll look at that in a second, there's a range that Enphase will trade between, and that to me is the institutions doing what they do, quarter over quarter, buying and selling the stock based on current performance and guidance. Now, Badri being an incredibly brutally honest CEO, I think is ultimately a good thing for retail investors, because he's telling you exactly how the company is doing, what they did wrong, right? So when you hear that, you go, this is what they did wrong. And then you can make an assessment as to whether or not you want to invest. So him being brutally honest is one of the reasons why you see the response that you see from Wall Street, because he's not going to sandbag numbers. Maybe a little, but he's also not going to give some kind of bullshit guidance and kick the can down the line to keep the stock price artificially up. So if he comes on an earnings call and he'll say, I mean, in no uncertain terms, we fucked up this quarter. We overproduced too many inverters with not enough demand. And so we have to lower our price. We're going to have lower gross profit margins, or we're going to be sitting on inventory, right? So he says that, and Wall Street goes, oh my God, this is horrible. And they tank out. But a retail investor, there's an opportunity there, because we as retail investors have a longer time horizon to achieve the yield that we want, versus a hedge fund manager or an institution that needs to show profit quarter over quarter. Them getting returns on their Enphase stock is important for them to keep their jobs. Right. Us accumulating Enphase shares is important for us to build a good base foundation for massive gains in the future. And so for me, I look at that as a positive.
Yeah, it's one thing that I've noticed over the last few years, especially as macro has shifted and not just universally just been negative on almost every industry, is that those companies that tend to be have weaker leadership, weaker culture, maybe a weaker product that's not differentiated in the market. Anytime that they have sort of a negative earnings, they'll try to deflect and say, "Oh, Well, the reason why we have this down quarter is because of the macro, or there's weakness in the consumer, or there's these regulations that are causing fears or whatever. And there's always, at least a kernel of truth in that. What I'm seeing with Badri and with Enphase is they're not ignoring the reality of the down cycle, but they're saying, you know what, we could do better. We've messed up. We've not done this right. And you see that like both in the sobering way that they actually look at the business. It's not all gloom and doom, but certainly there's an element of like, we messed up. This isn't great. And even like the layoffs that they have announced recently, this last, I don't know if it's late October or early November, but a few weeks back. So,
do you notice how layoffs do you notice how layoffs seem to be better received when they're from software companies than hardware companies?
Yeah. Yeah. I was actually going to ask you about that. Like, so one of the pinnacles, or one of the features of Enphase that is a differentiator beyond just their product and their leadership, and I think the culture of the company as well. They also really know how to scale well. They're actually based in the United States too, so they can manufacture some of their products here. But it's that customer service for the installers. Like they just have really quick response time and everything. These layoffs, do you think that this is like really going to damage that culture, really going to damage that customer service, and then eat into that mode a little bit? Or do you think it's not ideal, but it's okay. It's not the end of the world for a hardware company.
Well, an offshoot of them being brutally honest with investors in his communications, it would follow that he's absolutely brutally honest with respect to the numbers, the financials. No, I don't think that because they fired a couple thousand people or whatever it was, that you're going to be waiting twice as long on a service call. I just think you're going to size your company to the demand that's coming in, right?
Right.
So even if we just look at some, can I share screen?
Yeah.
Let me see here. So even if you look here, this is Enphase's metrics. We can look at some of these. So if you look at just even the number of microinverters that they've shipped, you can see that they've drastically come down in terms of the number of microinverters that they've shipped. And you can see even here, generation and energy storage deployed. Those numbers have come down significantly from a peak of Q3 2023. So you could argue that Enphase doesn't necessarily need the same number of manpower that you needed if you've got much less systems being deployed at the time. Because and I used to work in this business. Anybody that's been following me, that I used to work in this business, but I was not solar per se, but I used to work in the alarm business and install low voltage alarms and camera systems. And that what you want is to install the system, and if you have a service contract on it, to be getting paid on the service contract without actually having to ever go visit it. So a lot of the Enphase systems that are out there, presumably, they won't need to visit again. They have the lowest fail rate in terms of their microinverters. It's something like 0.00. It's like 1 out of every 1,000 or more.
It's phenomenal.
Fail. It's so small, the number that they fail. So most of the calls that you would get, and I remember this from when I was installing, is when you're installing the system. It's not on a service call. It's when you're installing it. You run into a problem there, or you're trying to program the panel for a specific need or something unique to that customer. And you're like, I'm not figuring this out, or it's not working the way that I expect. Let me get on the phone. And you get on the phone while you're there on the job site. That's one of the reasons why it was important to Badri to cut the time down from the phone ringing to an answer down to like 2 minutes. And he was actually proud on one of those calls that he was able to shave a minute or 2 minutes off of that wait time. That's important because that's customer facing, right? And then you understand that if a customer, and I'm talking the end of the line customer now, has a great system in their house and they're happy with it, when someone comes over and says, oh, hey, are you happy with solar? Has it been working out for you? Yeah, the numbers are great. I'm not paying whatever. Can I look at it? They're going to look and they're going to see Enphase on the wall. And this is the reason why people think Enphase makes solar panels, right? Because they see Enphase and they think it's that. But that's the idea. Like, they understand that customer is going to be an ambassador for your company, even if you've never had a touch point with them. And so you want to work with good, high quality installers. And then you want the system to work where the installers feel comfortable being able to vouch for these systems. And to your point, what good is saving $5,000 on a solar system if 2 years down the line you have a problem and that company's bankrupt? What you're going to then need to do is have another installer come in and take over that system, or they're not going to touch it. They're going to say, sorry, we don't deal with whatever this rinky-dink company is, and you're basically fucked.
Yeah, it's it's a compelling advantage. Now, as far as like the products of Enphase itself, so they sell microinverters. Of course, the newer product, the IQ8 inverter. I'm learning
Battery.
about that. What do you think? First, what do you think about that new microinverter? And are there any other products? Because they've added some products as well that you think are very compelling to the bull thesis of Enphase.
Well, I don't know if necessarily one product's going to say push them up over the edge, but some of what they've done is, I mean, look, it's a really basic system. What they do, the inverter turns the energy from DC to AC. How can you improve on that? They already have incredibly high efficiency, and the nature of the system itself being a distributed risk also adds to efficiency. So I'm not sure that gaining any more efficiency is going to move the needle. So what they're doing is they come up with some other products like, hey, like for example, now, if even though I have solar installed in my house, if the power goes out in my area, I legally have to turn my solar system off.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason I have to turn my system off is because if they're working on the lines, my system is generating electricity that will make the grid live.
Right.
And so without any place for that energy to go that my systems are creating, I'm risking damaging the workers who are trying to fix the grid for the rest of us. Enphase's, the IQ8s have unique properties where they're able to create a self-contained system at home where they'll be able to limit the production of the solar panels to what is needed in the moment, so that you can run your solar system without having to shut it off when the power goes down. Now, for a lot of people, that's a big deal.
Yeah,
that's a big deal because you're like, why did I pay all this money? And if the grid is down, I can't, or if I don't have a backup battery. But they've also been making movements in their EV charging, which is great.
right.
And they're going to be offering, I think, bi-directional EV charging, where it's like what Tesla's offering now. Cybertruck's battery could power your home. And I actually believe that that's going to be a bigger deal than most people think. And I actually think having a really good vehicle to home system it kind of eliminates the need for a traditional large battery backup system, or it kind of eliminates the need for what the IQ8s do.
Oh,
like
yeah.
because what does it matter if the energy, like, does your refrigerator care if the power that's coming during a blackout is coming from the battery in your Cybertruck or from the sun directly off of the IQ8s? Doesn't really matter. So I think them pushing harder into this vehicle to grid and bi-directional EV charging is going to be a bigger play for them. But again, Enphase is so far removed from the end customer that would be going to research this, that it's really more about capturing and continuing to educate their current base of installers and turning them into real brand ambassadors, champions for the brand. And that's what they do. They spend a lot of money in training. They spend a lot of money acquiring and training and maintaining those relationships with the installers. And really the ones that are hurting right now are those guys. That's who's hurting the most right now, are the installers. So as long as the installers can stay afloat and not go out of business, I do not see them migrating away from Enphase as their primary source of microinverters and systems by and large.
Yeah, that's a real bear case. Is if a lot of those solar install companies are going belly up, that really hurts Enphase, and we haven't seen that yet. If this cycle continues, for the next few years, it's certainly possible. But as far as interest rates, that's one of the things that are falling. That'll help over time Enphase. Cost of energy, it's kind of interesting. A lot of people are fixated on the cost at the pump, and oil, despite Democrats and Biden rhetoric typically being, like don't drill oil. Like, we've drilled a lot. Like, United States is producing more oil than any other time in their history. That'll continue under Trump, but it still, energy prices are depending on the source, they usually just continue to rise. Some of it's regulation, some of it, like here in Houston, we should be like the energy capital of America, and in some ways we are, or one of two, I guess. But when Hurricane Beryl hit, CenterPoint botched that whole recovery effort. Their preparation was just really terrible, and as a result, all of us are paying for repairs for that storm, and they're raising rates on top of that permanently. It's frustrating. Even though it's still fairly cheap as far as energy costs, they always tend to go in one direction, right? So as far as regulation, like that, it's been interesting tracking Enphase, because I was interested before the election, but I was like, maybe not yet. Let's see how the election goes. And as soon as Trump emerged as a clear winner, a lot of stocks, just pumped right up. Bitcoin was one of those that you and I get to enjoy all
I
around.
literally had I don't know if you can see it, but I literally have this on my screen. Do you see this?
Oh, nice. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's going to break.
It's a live
I'm pretty
view
proud
of the price.
It might
It's a live
break and
view.
fall back down to the 90s, but like it's inevitable,
I feel
But
like I'm doing a finance junkies tomorrow, and I'm hoping, my God, it would be awesome if it breaks 100,000
live. Yeah.
If
That
it
would
breaks
be amazing.
100,000 while we're live, you are going to see some cowbell. You're
Oh,
gonna
yeah.
see some very happy investors. So we'll see.
So, but as far as like Trump, like Enphase started tanking at that moment. And the narrative is, this guy hates green energy. He's going to take away all of the incentives and just make harder regulation as well. I don't think that's fully true, but like, what do you think? Like, are things going to be much harder for Enphase under a
Yeah.
Trump administration than it would be under Harris? And like, how damaging is that going to be?
Well, I could argue that the negatives of a Harris administration would have been way more than just, would not have outweighed the benefit of cheaper energy prices.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, Trump rolling back a lot of the incentives is going to affect, is a negative catalyst, because even me, I got, I don't know, I think my system was $27,000. I got $9,000 off.
Yeah.
So I could either, if I was willing to pay 27,000, I could get a bigger system. I could get a 1/3 bigger system, or just pay less. So that is going to be an issue for them. And this is where I think we should just pull up this chart, because I want to just show some, because we're talking about investing, right?
Yeah.
Let's look at some charts here. We can see that. You see this?
Mm-hmm.
All right, so this is Enphase's chart. Now, I know we typically will chart lines, graph lines of trend lines, but for me, Enphase trades more in horizontal channels than like vertical channels, or tracking the price. If you look at historically where it's been, this is where we saw the run up. Where are we? We're in 2019. So here we are in 2020, and you can see we're at the 18, right? We're talking $18-25 price, and then we started to pump up around March. This is the COVID drop, 23, 20, $24, and then you see that it slowly inched its way up as the conversation of switching more to green energy became prevalent. And then you see that it basically traded in this range for a long time. And what do they say? The bigger the base, the greater the breakout, right? So
That's right.
what you see is it traded in this range for a long time. So this is the 225 range. We're down here at 113 and 180s, 140s, back up to 280, back down to 115, 225 to 134. You see that this is a real range of accumulation. And we look at volume down here. Volume is pretty steady. And then where are we now? This is 2023, and now this was November 2023, right? Okay, so this is November 2023, and then we sort of traded back down into this range, a 105 to 140 range. Enphase likes to be in, say, the 120 to 180 range. That's where I think you're going to see just the maximum amount of volume, at least for now. And you can see that we've actually broken support. This was a $73 range. This was a key line of resistance back in August of 2020. We dipped down below it, and then it was off to the races. These are weekly candles, so you can see we went 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks, a month straight as we ramped up. Let me see. Are you still here? Because I can't see you.
Oh yeah.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
I could throw it back up.
Yeah,
here.
there you go. That's it. There you go. So you can see we had 1, 2, 3, 4 weeks straight of Enphase stock rising. So we went from, if we just track this, we did a 85% move in a month. 85% move in a month. And I also want to point out that for a good part of, as Enphase made its run up for, what is this here? Why don't we just track from, hold on, I'm trying to control from here. Why don't we just look at from here to here? So this was a move. This was a 197% move. We had some pullbacks, but 197% move from January of 2022 to December 2022. Enphase stock in 2022 was like this massive bull. It was like everyone's safe haven. It was the stock that was climbing when everything else was tanking. It felt like the stock was absolutely bulletproof. And this is institutions, I think, using Enphase as a safe haven to invest their money during some other tumultuous times. But then you see what the markets giveth, they taketh away. And so you can see how after we did have that run up, Enphase peaked somewhere around $340. luckily, just by a complete luck, timed the top, and I sold right at the top, and it bought me a Model X at that time. I needed some money for a Model X, and it got it for me. So
That's
Enphase,
beautiful.
and then also Enphase bought me the Model Y. So I got nothing but love for this stock. But then we proceeded to tank down another 80% off of the tops, back down to what? $74 range. Okay, and that was November of 2023. Okay, now cut to from November 2023 to where we are now, another 357 days, basically another full year, with us going 100% up and down within a year. And now we finally broken that support. So you can see that Enphase didn't touch. Enphase stayed above $73 for 1,134 days. It tested that $73 range. And even with the macro being unforgiving or not looking good for Enphase in the future, it still bounced off of that, popped up to, again, the $130, $140 range, and then it's come back down. We recently broke support now, and that's all the Trump effect. That's saying, okay, the IRA, all these things are gone. But here's an important thing to talk about. If we just overlay the federal interest rates on top of this chart, you can start to see a correlation. Okay, so here's the federal interest rates. Okay, federal interest rates here. You can see as federal interest rates drop, what does Enphase stock do? Enphase goes up.
Yeah.
Okay, stayed flat for a while. We had some growth, and then as interest rates started to come up, Enphase stock started to come down. Now we're seeing rates come down and Enphase stock come down. Well, to me, that's an indication that there's more. It's like it's the few catalysts that we talk about. The interest rate drawdown on the stock might be coming down, but now we have regulatory pressures.
Yeah.
So we need to see some kind of sort of positive regulations that can push in Enphase's direction. Basically, Enphase has to make the case now that solar is still a viable option to meet your family's needs, both as an investment and in terms of the power production needs that you're going to need. You need to make the case that having solar on your house is still better than getting your power from the grid and paying the prices that you're paying at the grid. The idea would be that if the solar system is creating all the energy that you need to power your house for a month, it doesn't matter what the rate is. Who cares what the energy rate is from the company, right?
Yeah, that's one of the things that a few other folks are telling me is, like, at least in certain areas where they live, they're like, solar doesn't make sense right now. Of course, high interest rates are a big factor of that, because few people are just paying the lump sum. They're instead wanting to go ahead and break that out over the 20 or 30 years, however long. And so rates are certainly part of the picture. Regulation is kind of interesting because, you know, there may be some favorable regulation that is tangential to Enphase, that's just for the solar industry, that ends up hurting them just because it's hurting installers. But as far as like manufacturing credits are one of those things that Enphase is getting. Do you see Trump removing those over the next 4 years?
That's a good question, because it depends on where they're produced. I think if anything, he would use the credits in the same way that they're using tariffs to incentivize companies to do more building in America. And it's quite possible that they'll remove some of those regulatory credits. But at the end of the day, like, remember, like, they still need to be installing systems. We still need customers at the end of the line purchasing these things, whether or not they're getting a credit. That's great for us on the investor side, but that would be greatly outweighed if they got rid of the incentives to them, but installers saw a two or three times increase in the installation rate. If that happens, that will eradicate or more than offset any reduction in government subsidies. And in general, you don't want to be reliant on these government subsidies. You want the company to be able to sustain itself on its own, have the demand there, right, and be able to just show increasing revenue and profits over a long time frame. Here's another thing that really fucked them. So if you're in California, one of the big incentives that we had to install solar was the net metering. The net metering, what that means is net metering has to do with how much money you get when your system overproduces electricity and sends it back to the grid. The idea is if you've got a big solar system and you're not using all this power, you are sending it back to the grid to help ease the load and distribute that to other customers. And the electric company will pay you a price per kilowatt hour for that. I'm grandfathered into the previous one, but as of, what is this? As of April 14th, I think it is. Yeah, as of April 14th of 2023, they changed the rules. And here it is. The changes to California's net metering policy cut the value of solar energy credits by about 75%. So you can see how Enphase's stock and the solar industry in general has been attacked on multiple levels. I would say the changes to the net metering and net metering and the EV tax credit, or the credits, are the three biggest knives in Enphase's back right now. Because when you would try to tell people, when you would talk to people, try to convince them to get solar, those were the talking points. You're gonna get 30% of it back, and don't worry about it. If you overproduce, they're gonna pay you for the power. Now, a lot of the bull case for installing solar in general is gone. So what you're left with is basically making the case for it's the case you were making in 2014, 2015, gas and oil versus electricity. Now you're back to that talking point, and that's why I think we're going back to those prices in the stock.
And that's a harder sell too, like if somebody's just very for green energy, like great. But I mean, most people are like myself and maybe yourself too, that, it's nice saving the planet and reducing emissions and doing renewable energy source. But bottom day, at the end of the day, it's really about saving money for us. And that's why I would go solar. That's one of the reasons why I'm driving a Tesla right now, is like the bang for the buck. Like it's the best vehicle out there. It just is. It's very cheap and efficient to run. Versus like if that wasn't the case, I'd be less interested in Tesla. And so do you, since this is very cyclical, and this is a harder sell for a while, at least, is there anything that's on the horizon out, several years that may change and actually flip this cycle back to bullish beyond just the rates that we talked about?
Rates coming down, rates continuing to come down will help Enphase. It's not that it's not going to hurt Enphase, but I see, whereas at one point I was seeing Enphase as a true growth beast in the making, I'm seeing them more of a value play now.
Yeah.
In the sense of this is what I mean. Solar's not going away. We will continue to get more solar customers year over year, but it's the rate that we're going to be getting those customers is drastically reduced. Right. So I don't see Enphase having these blowout quarters like we saw before, because the tailwinds that they had to generate those blowout quarters were lowering interest rates, EV tax credit, EV mandates, and spiking energy prices. The idea was that you can't control the price of oil. Saudi Arabia could change something tomorrow, make the price of gas and oil skyrocket through the roof, but your electricity prices are more or less level, the same. So why not change a majority of your energy creation, get it away from coal and oil and gas and put it into solar, which is more stable? That's still the case, but as energy prices have come down in terms of oil and gas, electricity prices have come up. Right. And then on top of that, the other incentive of selling the power back to the grid, the return on that investment has also come down. Yeah. So you're getting squeezed in every single possible direction. And at least now, unless the administration makes a big pivot towards opening that back up, I see Enphase in traditional growth mode. Mm-hmm. In terms of, they'll still grow, but it's going to be just a lot slower. The rate's going to be a lot slower. The quarters will be a lot more predictable. The revenue will be a lot more predictable. And then to your point, the fact that they're cyclical, where customers tend to install these systems at specific points of the year, that's not going to change either. And so you are going to have sort of built-in good quarters and bad quarters.
Yeah, so here's basically my thesis, and it builds around like the points that you've raised, is that the impact of Trump on Enphase is overblown. Like, people act like he's anti-green energy. He's not. He's maybe doesn't care for some of the incentives and picking favorites in that way. But he's very pro-energy, like, bottom line. He has made comments in the past regarding manufacturing credits here in the United States, not just for solar. I don't know that he's made specific ones on that, but he seems to actually favor that because he's all about bringing manufacturing back to the United States. So I think that credit is here to stay, no matter what people are expecting. Like that's very, very likely to remain. National incentives regarding solar as a whole, which will lower the number of installs, those may be on their way out. But a lot of the regulatory, and I'm actually kind of curious if you know the breakdown of this, or a lot of the credits are actually from local incentives, like just from California or from a certain municipality, or just from the local the grid. So CenterPoint in our case in Houston.
I think that's where it should be, to be honest. I think that's where the incentive should come from.
And I agree, and I think there's a lot of advantage from these electrical companies because they have to do like very, very little on their end to actually accommodate solar, because you are having an installer who is not the company come out and install it, hook it up to the grid, and boom, all of a sudden their energy output has actually increased. And then there's a secular trend that is causing a lot more energy demand. Part of it, Bitcoin mining, but really it's AI. AI gobbles up energy dramatically, and so we've seen this whole pivot with nuclear energy, where versus a couple of years ago, oh, nuclear energy, it's on its way out. They're shutting down reactors left and right. Still doing it in Europe for some reason. Can't figure that one out. But they've now reactivated, I believe, all but one nuclear reactor here in the United States. They're all running on full capacity. There's others that they can reactivate, but it takes a lot of time, a lot of effort, a lot of regulation.
Yeah.
And so what I'm seeing is a substantial thirst for energy. And this isn't will it be nuclear, or will it be oil and natural gas, or will it be solar? The answer is yes. It will be all of those things contributing. And solar is one of the easiest to ramp up, just because you don't have to explore for it. You don't have to figure out where the sun is. You don't have to spend all that time building nuclear energy plants. And so I think on a local level, we're going to see incentives continue to increase, especially from combination of municipalities, maybe statewide as well, and individual companies that are installing it that will benefit individuals. And I know not everything is golden, but it seems like the market is missing that to me. You're muted.
Check.
All right. We'll cut that one out.
Yeah,
I'll wave my hands here so I know. Yep, right. Good.
I was saying it's funny you read my mind, because the missing part of this equation now is the fact that although regulation and credit environment and all these other things are acting as a negative catalyst, we are about to enter or in a phase of super increased energy demand. And it's not just data centers, but even things like Bitcoin mining. If the US says that they're going to create a strategic Bitcoin reserve, you also then need a form to mine that energy to protect that network. So now energy is becoming a matter of national security. And I think what you're going to see moving forward is a lot of this states that are going to need to create sort of their own like independent energy creation on the commercial side, right? And so the idea goes from the narrative for getting solar is that it's free energy versus the cheapest form of energy. It's sort of abundant energy. And when with such an overwhelming demand coming between AI, data centers, and Bitcoin mining, you have to ask yourself, you cannot discount the impact that having this reliable free energy, that to your point is some of the lowest cost to capture.
Mm-hmm.
And so no matter what, solar is going to be a part of it. Even if it's not the majority, it's going to be a part of solving the needs, our increased energy demand coming up. And so, like I said, it's going to be a slow climb up now. It's not going to be this absolute growth beast. I don't think so. But do I think that the stock will be higher in 5 years than it is now? Absolutely. I can't see how it's not, as they continue to deploy more and more and more. It's going to be more. But is it going to be the $600 price that we at once thought it would reach? Probably not.
Yeah. Something would have to change in the cycle. And it could. Like we don't know what's going to happen in the next 5 years. It could be energy demand just ramps up so fast that's the best way to sustain it, is local incentives, pushing for solar installation. I'm certainly excited to see how that'll play out. But as far as like, how are you playing it? So are you holding tight with your Enphase position? Are you buying more shares? Are you buying leaps at this point? What are you doing?
I'm actually in line with the with what I believe the consensus is. It's a hold for me. I actually no, at these levels I'm accumulating, but I've kind of got my eye on other things that I've been accumulating. There's some other more depressed stocks, so I'm kind of balancing that versus the opportunity cost. But yes, I am playing them on the option side. That's been like, my God, their option premiums are so freaking good.
Yeah.
Their options premiums are so good. And like the stock price is a great price to play for options. That like, this is what got Apple to the $3 trillion is that it's staying in and around $100. This is why Nvidia is where it's at, staying in and around $100, right? And so for me, it's like $60-$70 price. It's great to accumulate some shares, but I've also been buying 160 leaps, because the 160 leaps for me are right in that 140 to 220 range that we've seen Enphase go, or 115 to 180 range. It's kind of in that sweet spot. The premiums are really good. There's a lot of volume there, so I know I can unload it when it comes to me. So for now, I'm using leaps to get some exposure to Enphase while I try to free up some capital that will let me actually go and deploy those shares. But I do believe that on the way up to 160, because I'm buying them so freaking cheap, these call options, I do think that I'll be able to sell for a massive profit and convert that money into shares that will get me more shares than if I would have bought the shares when I bought the leaps.
Right. Yeah. And with those, if anyone's listening, like, just if you're not familiar with options, stay away until you understand them.
Or
Buy
follow
yourself. Don't go for like 2025. Go for 2027 if you're going to do leaps.
The 2027 leaps are what I've been getting, the 160.
Yeah, myself, I just own straight shares at this point, and I'm selling call options on it. I'm doing cash
but I'm willing some of options against it.
Yeah, the premiums are ridiculous for
They're
that. So
fucking
it's a Wheeler's
ridiculous. I mean, are they still like in the teens?
I mean, it depends on the strike, but basically, I'm doing.
Hold on. Let's look this shit up, man.
Yeah.
I think I posted something about this under one of your tweets.
I'm doing what I feel like pretty conservative strikes are, and I'm getting more than a 1% yield on just weeklies, which is insane. Like it's like a Bitcoin miner, but like way safer. So
here we are. We're looking at the. Hold on.
Can you blow that up? There you go.
So we want to go all the way out to 2027, all strikes. We want to just look at, let's just look at calls. So let's go out to like the 160. Oh, they're at like $7-8 now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, this is buying them. Yeah. But if you're these are not bad. Look at this. The 170s are $13. What is this, bids? Hold on. This is that's the last price. Okay. So this is what they actually sold for. And then you bid on your ass. So, I mean, $13.
Yeah.
It's only 30. How far out are we? Well, these are also the 2027s. Let's look at where are we? January.
Yeah, look at January 2025. Throw that up. Just a guy who's a seller selling into that. Like
they're garbage.
Well,
garbage.
No, like
to buy them, yeah, but I'm saying to sell them, you're not getting anything.
Yeah.
But I mean, look at this. Yeah, if you want to go out a year, 58 cents. But I mean, do I think any Enphase is going to come anywhere near this next year? No fucking way, dude. There's no fucking way.
It could in an irrational bull market, but you never want to place your bets on that in an everything up rally. So no.
But the thing is, even in an irrational market, is Enphase going to be the play? Like, think about what would make it irrational. It's going to be some crazy AI shit. It's going to be some crazy war shit. Is Enphase going to be the beneficiary of some crazy? No.
Yeah.
Like, no, they're like a good, boring business, which you want. Ultimately, you want like just like boring businesses that just continue to print money, and that's what you got. You got Badri. He's kind of like a boring CEO, tells you how it is. It's straight. Like, I want him to be shepherd of my money, but I would never want to work for the guy.
And they're using AI, but it's like in the most boring way. It's a really good way because it helps their installers as far as with the regulation. Yeah, they don't like try to pump AI 50 times on the stock.
But they should. Like, honestly, why isn't he talking? Why aren't they talking to some of these companies?
Well, so it's a little bit newer vector. So I'm hoping that they do this next quarter. They have some really innovative products. I think that they're a clear leader here versus like SolarEdge, which you mentioned them. It's kind of a triopoly between three big companies. You have Tesla, which everybody knows, Enphase, and then SolarEdge. And SolarEdge, man, like. If you look at its stock chart, it's insane what's happened. But that reflects the reality that this business is actually not as strong as Enphase. Enphase is a lot better run. SolarEdge has a lot of debt. They're not making money right now, and they're in real danger. if this cycle continues to be depressive towards solar over the next couple of years, I don't think that they'll like go bankrupt, but they could end up getting bought out.
Well, here's the like above and beyond all of that. Let's look at it. Let's look at SolarEdge. This is
It's
SolarEdge.
crazy.
See, the problem with SolarEdge is that they're a shit company. The problem is that they don't give a shit about their customers. They don't care about their customers. I've been on the phone with these guys trying to fix the problem that I had in my house, and they would basically say, well, it's not our fault. It's the installer's fault. Then the installer will say, this is a manufacturer defect, and I'm caught in the middle with no fucking power, and I'm paying for this shit every month. And they did not care. So you know what? Let that stock go to zero. Actually, no, we need more than one company, but let this stock get what it's got coming to it. Now this stock is trading. If you look at this stock is trading at $12, and the last time it was at $12 is December 16th. You know what? Good for you. You have lost all of the value when you have prioritized growth above all else. Growth with no concern for customer service. Growth for no concern for what the customer's needs are. If that's what you get, now you get kicked back down to 2016, and you're left licking your wounds, figuring out what you did wrong. They should get some new management getting changed, or just buy out the company. Honestly,
yeah, they had a 2020 business model, and that doesn't work right now at all. So, and that's the other part of the thesis for me with Enphase is the competition. So the competition, there's competition there. But between tariffs, which are not great, like overall, just because it's going to raise the cost of the panels, which means fewer people install here in the States. But the tariffs also do prevent competition as far as inverters coming over from China, from companies that may not be there tomorrow anyway. Not the biggest fear, but it's also putting pressure on people like SolarEdge. And so it feels like, although there's different reasons for it, when crypto went through its crypto winter, and there was competitors like Celsius, FTX that were just scummy, that had terrible business models or downright fraud that just blew up. And I was looking at Coinbase. I never bought Coinbase, but I'm like, if I understand crypto correctly, it's cyclical. It's not dead. It will come back, and sure enough, that's played out. And Coinbase will be the beneficiary because so much of their competition, both who existed at that time and future competition, which takes a little while to build up, all of a sudden that has been like cleared out, just gutted by a fire. Coinbase is still around. Boom. We get back into a bull cycle. They benefit tremendously. I don't think solar is going to be in a bear cycle, forever. It may take a couple of years. We might not see until like 2026, 2027 for it to for people to realize like, oh, it's not dead. Energy demand is so high that this is one of the best solutions to actually scale this, especially in a lot of localities here in the United States. It could be faster too, but that's kind of what I'm thinking of. And in that time, if that's the case, a lot of their competition is cleared out, and Enphase is there. It survived yet another bear cycle, and people are flocking to it because it has really good technology. It's resilient. It will continue to innovate and be around in the future, and installers will trust it.
I actually don't subscribe to Enphase having competition. That might sound crazy, but they don't have any competition because the buffer is the installers. Any competitor needs to come in and make a compelling case to a company to stop their existing supply chain, flush out their current inventory, retrain their staff, which is a CapEx expenditure, right? Yeah. And then switch over to a different company. Not to say that some won't, but that's going to be more, the competition in that sense will be more from startups that come into the game and say, we're going to be installing whatever. Hoy Miles was one of them, right? From China. Let's go and install some Hoy Miles fucking inverters. Okay, great. Well, my neighbor down the block has Enphase. They said that they haven't had an issue for 5 years. What's the oldest system that you have installed, and is it still running? Well, we're kind of a startup now. It's just the installer network, I think, is the buffer against this idea that the competition is coming, because a cheaper price to them on the inverter still requires a tremendous outflow of capital on the other side to train, retrain, and build out a network to install those systems. So it makes somewhat of a dent, but I do not think that it's going to move the needle much. But to your point, having them come out and seeing them fizzle and drop off the map, it further I think it furthers the Enphase bull case that we are the unmovable leader in this industry. Others will come and go, and we're still going to be here. This is why, Coinbase stock is set to benefit from all of these frauds, because they're saying, look, we are making money and we didn't have to do any of this. We don't run our business like those guys. And now that they're out of the way, come back to the big dog. Come back to the original. We're going to absorb all of those customers, and we're going to treat you correctly, and we'll forgive you for for putting your money on one of those other exchanges.
Yeah, no, I that's a good point. Like, as far as competition, I think that's very valid. I do see, like, in the future bull cycle for solar, whenever that does happen, there will be a lot of new installers getting into that game, and I think that that's where Enphase will excel, just because of their reputation, that they're still around, that they've been around all these different cycles. They have a great product that's very reliable, just like the company. As far as customer service, as far as tools for actual installation, there's nobody like them. Like, they're number one. They're the clear leader here to me, for a reason. So it'll be interesting to kind of see how it plays out. What do you have any predictions? I know that you're buying some leaps, but let's go out to January 2027. Where do you think Enphase might be as a business and as a stock?
I think Enphase will disproportionately benefit from the efficiencies that we're set to gain over the next 2 years versus their competition. A real part of the bull case for Enphase is Elon Musk and Tesla.
Yes. Yeah.
Because
I was going to mention that.
Tesla can't serve all the customers. Okay. They can't. But what they're really good at is promoting the message of solar. Right.
Yeah.
And so they can't service everybody. So Tesla is the tide that is rising, that is going to lift all boats. And Enphase is the largest boat of all the boats that are going to be lifted. So as Tesla increases awareness, look, every single person who buys an EV immediately looks to solar and just to check it out. If you're buying an EV, you start saying, well, let me just check out the solar. And maybe say 1 out of 10 actually gets solar. And maybe 1 out of those 10 gets Enphase and 9 get Tesla, right? Or 8 of them get Tesla. So every 200, 300 cars that Tesla sells, eventually that money leads down to Enphase. I'm not saying that, I don't know these numbers for sure, but I'm just theoretically, right? Tesla's not going to capture every customer that they educate about solar, period. And Tesla is going to sell more and more vehicles over the years. Tesla, with their Cybercab network, is going to expose more people to the idea of EVs and Tesla in general. And some of those customers with zero cost of customer acquisition to Enphase will find their way to Enphase. So as Tesla continues to do well, Enphase is going to do well. The other thing is, over the next 2 years, we've got him and Vivek in charge of the Department of Government Efficiency. Yes. Part of the government efficiency's issue is to save costs at all costs. And part of that, I think, is going to be looking at some of these energy needs, right? These energy needs, where the government is putting money towards subsidies for energy, and where the government itself is in the energy creation business. Enphase is going to be a beneficiary of those things. And so I do think that over the next 2 years, especially until they reach their mandate of July 4th, 2026, there's going to be so much talk about efficiency. And when you start talking about efficiency of your dollars, a huge part of your bill a year is the energy costs that it takes you to run your life. And so it's not something that you can quantify directly to Enphase, but it's there. It's not zero. We just don't know what it is. And it's not bad for them. We just got to see how good it is for them.
And I'm glad you brought up Musk. He certainly has Trump's ear right now, because I honestly don't know that Trump would have been elected if Elon Musk had not bought Twitter, had not made it X, had not supported Trump the way he had. It could be a very different environment, which would actually, ironically, maybe benefit Tesla, at least on the short term, a little bit more, and Enphase. But as far as like energy sources, Elon Musk has just so much love for solar. He talks about it all the time, the potential that's there. Tesla got into energy space, and a lot of it is on the commercial side, where they've had a lot of success, just because it's not as cyclical as the residential side.
And they have the money. They have the money, and they need to spend money.
Oh yeah, but they didn't get into it just simply because it's like, hey, let's make some extra money on the side. It's just because Elon Musk is a huge believer in the potential of solar energy, and it's being realized. And so this is a space where it's not just like a winner takes all of it and that's it. It's like, no, Tesla will be a winner. That's one of the reasons why I invested in Tesla. Enphase will be a winner. Maybe SolarEdge, I don't know, but there will be some other winners out there too. And I know First Solar is one that some people talk about. It's not in the inverter space, but it's it's up in Canada. People are excited about that one too.
Sunrun's another one out here.
Good one.
Sunrun's been making some inroads.
Yeah.
I know guys that got quotes for an Enphase system, a SolarEdge system, a Tesla system, and went with Sunrun.
Oh wow,
interesting.
Must be doing something right.
Yeah, no, and what he cited was they were the lowest price and they did a super clean install. And he said he had a great meeting with them, and some of the other companies felt a little bit shady. That's part of it too. Is like what could hurt Enphase is if they take a page from SolarEdge where they prioritize growth over everything. If you prioritize growth over everything, as SolarEdge did, you lower the bar in terms of the standards that you expect of the installers. And the installers on the SolarEdge side were very predatory towards the customers, over promising things that they could never deliver on, or not being very clear with the customer in terms of the cost, the ROI, the size of the system, the specifications of the system, and sort of preying on unsuspecting customers that then come out and speak against the brand. As long as Enphase has a very high standard for their installers, they'll continue to do well. But if they start to prioritize growth over everything, I think you'll see the stock price reflecting what you've seen in SolarEdge. But Badri does not seem like that kind of a CEO. With how honest he is, I can't see him lowering the bar to try to make some analysts happy on one earnings call. I don't think he'll leverage the future of the company to try to look good for a quarter or two. This is not a guy that sells a lot of stock, right? This guy accumulates. You understand? So this is a guy who's in it for the long haul, and he's a great operator. He's put in the right guys in the right position, and he's making the brutal cuts personnel wise that he needs to for the company to survive. So I think on every level, he's shown that the sustainable growth of the company is his priority, and I think that's what you want the CEO's head to be.
Yeah, no, I think it has phenomenal leadership. Badri has emerged as one. He's not like exciting or flamboyant, but I don't think you want that in this space. I will say that
they put out an ad like Jaguars new ad.
Oh man, can you imagine? Oh, what are they thinking?
A bunch of fairies flying around your house.
But the layoffs, like, to me, I think that's one of the reasons why, like, it actually sold off when the layoffs were announced, which typically companies tend to do the opposite. Is that there's concern that will erode some of that stellar customer service, and as a result, damage their brand. I don't think that'll be the case, because Badri talks about how important that is. But
that's a buying opportunity. That's people that just don't understand the company or don't understand the business. This guy's not going to cut so deep that it's going to affect his existing base or cut into the thing that makes his company unique and grow. He's not going to do that. So, and again, there's a different perception of cuts, of labor cuts at hardware companies versus software companies. It's very different,
Yeah. All right. So last, Carlos, how do people find you if they want to follow you on X or follow you on YouTube?
Follow me on X. I'm Sphere Cubed on X. We follow each other. You can find me there. I'm also Finance Junkies. Look at that. We do Finance Junkies at least once a week on Sundays. And feel free to follow there or follow us on YouTube. We'll be doing a show tomorrow all about the Bitcoin run. The one point that the one thing that I do want to further answer is, how do you play Enphase moving forward? For me, let's pull up the chart real quick and we can end on this.
Sure.
This is important. So how do you play Enphase moving forward? You see that we've got a pretty stable amount of volume in and of these levels. I mean, aside from like these crazy spikes. So if I get rid of the interest rates and we just look at, let me turn up this one. And we come here. Hold on, let me just right size this grid. Oh, there we go. Okay, you can see that at least for the foreseeable future, we can say that 330 is the top And right now, it looks like we did get a good solid bounce off of the $70 or $59. Like $60 seems really, really oversold. Okay, so we see between 60 and 130. I think there's a lot of money that you can make trading back and forth in this channel. This is why I say it's like a value stock, right? It's like trading AT&T from 25 to 35, back to 25, back to 20, back to 30, right? And they'll continue to buy back stock, right? They should, as long as they're making money, they can continue to buy back stock. But for me, it's about levels. I'm going to play this probably outsized, and I'm going to play outsized on the option side and convert the profit from those into shares wherever I see Enphase overstretched for where it should be. So I think if Enphase starts getting up around the 180, 190, anywhere near 200, to me, that's going to be either selling long dated options, selling options that are in profit, and converting those to shares on the inevitable drawback. You see that, like, typically Enphase's drawbacks, when it does start to draw back, you get a 40 or 50% correction, right? Yeah. So we got one there. What was this correction? This correction here. This correction was a 60% correction. So when Enphase corrects, it corrects.
Yeah.
Let's look at this one. This was a massive one. This was an 80% correction. But even in here, even if we go, and remember, these are weeklies. So this is over a good amount of time. So what do you got here? This is 50 days, 30% correction. Back here, 20% correction. So you got like 20, 40% correction. That kind of volatility is great, especially when you have a history of having 40% to 20% corrections. And it's historical. This is over several years now. And this is in the relatively new investment time frame. So knowing that Enphase likes to be within certain ranges, say 100 to maybe the $200 range, and that when you see that it's oversold and you start to get that correction, you probably got 2 or 3 months where it's going to come down 20%, 2 or 3 months where it's going to ramp back up 20% to 40%. To me, I'm going to try to play that and amplify the gains, because I'm not exactly sure if and when this new boom in solar is going to come. Yeah, I'm not sure.
I think it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. But I mean, I could be completely wrong. I would be a little bit surprised though. But yeah, when, I have no good feel of that. That's one of the challenges as it relates to Enphase. So.
Well, there's a lot of money that you could be made along the way, whether it's above and beyond just holding. To your point, selling calls when it gets up to that 20, 40%, sell some calls 20, 40% above that. When you see it come down 20, 40%, selling some puts on there, or buying some puts and on the way down and then selling puts. There's a lot of money that you can make in and of that range, just playing that forever. And if you really want to, then just convert those to shares later, so that when that run comes, if and when that day comes that solar is suddenly back in, or we get a bunch of governmental incentives or interest rates drop back down to 2%, you want to be holding the bag already, know?
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see how it plays out. Maybe let's revisit this in a couple of quarters and see where they're at. Appreciate you coming on. Thank you all for joining us today. I will put in the description where you can reach Carlos on both X and his Finance Junkies as well on YouTube. Until next time, happy investing.